Hello, Chairman Mary, can you hear me?
Hello, can anybody hear me?
I can hear whoever that is. This is Brian.
This is Paul Sebo.
Hey, Paul. I tried to get the boardroom to confirm that they could hear, but no one's responded yet.
So I take it you're on Zoom then too.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm awaiting somebody in my household for COVID test results, so quarantining until we get those back.
Good call. I'm just being proactive as all my homemates, coworkers, whatever, are all working outside the house, so they would not be happy with me if I
Definitely don't like being involved in meetings this way. It's
no.
not my style.
Yeah, I prefer not as well, but I didn't know what any participation might be with the public hearing, but the way the looks of it, there won't be anybody.
Unless I got them lined up outside in the hallway.
That could be true.
I doubt it, but
discussion points tonight? Can alterations be made to 275?
Yes. By majority of your, yes, by consensus you can. Yes.
Okay, the amendment process?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, so you're really acting on a petition and the accompanying enacting ordinance, but we want change made to the actual substance. You know, it probably doesn't have to be quite so formal as voting on, but I guess we want a majority. We might change the actual body.
Well, the official clock on my computer says it's 6 p.m. So we will conduct this meeting of the Land Use and Planning Committee. The agenda was posted in the office of the county clerk on the 20th day of October. Notice was sent to the West Bend Daily News, Express News, WIBD, WMBZ Radio, WTKM Radio, My Community Now, Hartford Times Press, Kewaskum Statesman, and the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Let's all stand, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America,
Yeah.
and to the republic for
Public
which it stands,
stand,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
Since we've announced there'll be a public hearing on two matters, we will proceed with those first and then come back to the consent agenda and other action items. One thing I want to just express tonight, particularly those of you who are here, and we've got a couple members remote. Is that correct, Mary? Have they signed in with us?
We have Supervisor Gallitz and Paul Sebo from Planning and Parks are remote right now.
Have we heard from Supervisor Schulteis?
We have not.
All right, and we don't know about Mr. Strupp if he'll be joining us or not. My point being, if you're going to have discussion, please do use the microphones, particularly so anybody listening, and in this case Supervisor Gallitz and Paul Sebo can hear us as well. And if you want to start speaking or something, if we don't have Mary's attention, wait till your microphone goes red and then start speaking so we don't lose some of the conversation. So at this point in
Excuse me,
time, I'll call
Chairman.
the hearing to order. We welcome comments from anyone participating live or who can access this meeting remotely through the YouTube connection. We ask that you be recognized and then state your name and address and when you are at the microphone. At this point in time, we're going to ask Mary to read the notice of the hearing regarding Chapter 275, Shoreland, Wetland, and Floodplain Zoning. Mary?
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing to be held at a meeting of the Washington County Land Use and Planning Committee in room 1019 of the Washington County Herbert J. Tennis Government Center on Thursday, October 22nd, 2020 at 6 p.m. There will be heard and considered an ordinance amendment for the Shoreland, Wetland, Floodplain, Chapter 175 zoning ordinance. This amendment is proposed to comply with the state statute changes relating to shoreland zoning ordinances and Wisconsin Administrative Code NR 115. Specific proposals include but are not limited to the following related topics: removal of items not exempt from the required ordinary high watermark setback, more specifically the removal of fences, retaining walls, and architectural projections as structures that must meet the setback requirements, removal of a required minimum side yard setback, updating and clarifying what is permitted with non-conforming uses and structures, adding a provision allowing for the maintenance of illegal structures that have been in place for more than 10 years, dated this 5th day of October, 2020.
Thank you. Now, this is a very lengthy document. It's been before the group before, and I believe it's been thoroughly discussed, edited, and amended, and should be considered in its final stage. At this point in time, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the draft ordinance and a second, and then we'll get into discussion. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Supervisor Krebs, and seconded by Mr. Boltman. At that point in time, Jamie, do you have any comments to make? Then we'll go into open discussion.
I do. I just wanted to comment. So we are in our second week of a slightly new structure in our land resources division, with both Deb Silsky, who's here tonight, and Paul Sebo taking a slightly more active role in some of the process things. One of the things that we talked about as it relates to this ordinance change was that when we went through this ordinance change, we really focused on the law and where we could potentially be less restrictive, or what changes were being requested by the DNR, and our compliance with Wisconsin DNR state law related to the ordinance. We have been having both discussion with this committee and both internally about a few other additional topics. A couple we've talked about, backlot development, potentially talking about the mitigation section in here. And we also, in the past couple of weeks, both Deb and Paul have identified some areas where process is slightly commingled and maybe not as clear as it could be for applicants. So as we talk about that, we believe that we probably will be having an additional discussion about this ordinance as it relates to how it's administered and potentially some additional areas. However, we do feel that all of the changes that are in here that we've been working on that are proposed are all advantageous for county residents and recommended at this point, and or required by the DNR. And so we feel that we can support everything in this ordinance as it relates to changing this now and getting these changes accomplished.
Supervisor Krebs, I believe you had some comments or some questions.
Yes, thank you. I apologize, I missed last month's meeting. The big topic that I wanted to just touch on for possibly some discussion or changes would be the section on boathouses, which I believe is on page 21. Yeah, it's a 21 if you use the page numbering on the bottom of the pages, not the iPad numbering. I had some concern about just putting the dimensions in here that we did. I understand there's a maximum square footage and a minimum square footage, but once we started limiting the height of the structures and the width of the structures, and even what types of doors could be put on them, that I really didn't understand what purpose that served in here. And I think we were going a little bit far on putting those limits on there, because being on the Board of Adjustment, I've seen numerous variance appeals for these specific items that, not all lake lots are fit boat houses well, and sometimes taller boat houses, or there's a variety of circumstances that I think we should open this up a little bit more. I'm still okay with the overall maximum size, but I think we shouldn't dictate the maximum height or the width. Then also for the roof structure, I didn't understand why we're not allowing sidewalls on the roofs, but we would allow railings on the roof of the decks. So with that, I don't know if I should be making an amendment here, or does anyone have discussion?
Attorney Stern just said that we need to finish the public hearing before we continue discussion between committee members. So if there's anybody here from the public that needs to weigh in, and then we would close the public hearing and then have committee discussion.
Thank you, Mary. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to make any comments regarding this issue? If not, then at this point in time, we'll close the public hearing and go into discussion.
Excuse me, Chairman, do you need a motion to close?
Jamie, do you have any comments regarding Supervisor Krebs' question?
Well, I do, from the standpoint of, I'm not sure what you meant about the doors. We did strike the limitation on types of doors in the amendment. We did change it. I guess I would want him to maybe clarify specifically because, and Paul is on the line and he can weigh in on this as well if he remembers, but what they can and cannot do is very restricted by state law. So there may be some changes that you can propose. However, as it relates to, so like the railings, that's a good example. Boat railings are allowed, but walls or enclosures are just not allowed. So you couldn't make that change and be consistent with state law, I believe. So we just need to be clear on what you're actually proposing.
Do we need to vote to close the public hearing first, or
Sorry.
I'm just making sure we're closing out?
We need to vote to close it, but if there's no comment, they can close the public hearing. and discussion.
Okay, yeah, I heard you announce you closed it, but
Yes.
okay.
All right.
Well, I'll go through them point by point, and I guess
Yeah, okay.
so. First, I currently boathouses without having a height restriction can be up to 35 feet tall, is my understanding, and someone put in there that there was a suggestion that we should have a maximum height of the boathouses, or in this case, it's the sidewall of the structure. There again, I think I would personally prefer not to see that restriction on there and let the property owners determine that based off of their unique needs.
Okay, so you're specifically talking about sidewall height the insertion of sidewall height shall not exceed 10 feet.
Correct.
Okay, so yes, so that would be one. We previously talked about how we get the question frequently, how tall can we build these things? And that allows them to essentially slope the roofs with regards to the sidewalls. And so that the recommendation is consistent with generally how 1 story is being interpreted across the region, which is why it's proposed that way. So if we don't want to insert that and essentially leave it how it is today, which is vague and up to staff's interpretation, I would then have 2 asks of you. Number 1, are you thinking collectively as a group, if we're interpreting it, is it still, is it 12 feet? Is it 15 feet? What's reasonable? Right? Because the neighbors come in and ask us that. So by clarifying it further, we were trying to make it consistent and easily applicable for people coming in for these permits. And then secondly, do you all feel that way? Right? So I know you had said that 2 meetings ago, and I think Brian, who's on the line, said, I like it. And so we took that as a stalemate. I mean, that's kind of how we interpreted it at our level. So I just want to make sure you guys vet on that specific topic of if you're really talking about in or out on that specific phrase, correct?
Yeah, we already have that. It's only 1 story is allowed. So I clearly think that a property owner is only going to build what they actually need or what their specific lot requires of their 1-story boathouse. So, the last board of adjustment meeting, they had a case where there was a variance requested to build a taller wall for the boathouse. That there was the staff literally took a single wall and broke it into 2 separate walls because one was below grade and one was above grade. But there again, if it was truly a 1-story boathouse, I felt that was excessive, that the property owner had to go through the variance to start with on it. So I just think we're pinning ourselves in here to a point where we're going to require more variances if someone's building on a lot where if they have a steep slope or something like that they have something to overcome. So I personally would just take out that because we already have 1-story boathouse height in there to start with. We don't tell people that they can't build taller than a 10-foot wall on a regular house. People build 12-foot walls all the time. So with this, that's why I'm not comfortable with that.
How does everybody else feel?
I defer. I'm not involved with boathouses, so I don't have any opinion to give on this. I'm sorry.
I mean, I guess I guess I can see his point as far as what's reasonable, but you kind of have to limit it. Otherwise you might have everything mismatched. And wasn't it, you had referred to that it's also what in the region, so it's consistent with.
It is. Paul is on the line. Paul, do you have anything to add to this? Or not really?
Can we be heard at all?
He's my experience, so I'm just checking.
Can we be heard at all?
He's on mute. Can we unmute him?
This is Supervisor Gallitz. Can you hear me?
No, he's muted.
Can you hear me now? Hello? Hello?
Any comments, Paul?
Can you hear me? Hello?
No? Okay.
Paul, I can hear you,
can't
but
talk.
apparently they
can't
can't hear us.
Yes, can
Can you
anybody
crack
hear
look
me?
it up?
Okay, we're obviously
Okay.
not coming across.
Does Supervisor Gallitz have any?
Yes, can anybody hear me?
I mean, Paul, can you try talking?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you have anything
Okay.
to add?
So I mean, obviously, coming into this, I don't have all the history of boathouses and everything else. But obviously the 10-foot height is consistent. I will say there was a question internally as to that last Board of Adjustment as to whether that needed a Board of Adjustment or not. Phil believed it did because the extra wall height above was really for a retaining wall and not considering it, part necessarily of the structure. So we are trying to stay consistent with neighboring counties. I understand the concern about Board of Adjustments, but we're really trying internally to, definitely look at ways to make sure that we're not bringing a lot to the Board of Adjustment as need be. And it's only those purposes and finding, language in the code to say whether you truly need a Board of Adjustment or not, and work through those internally as opposed to trying to place stuff in code and in language. We're taking out some of the architectural features like the patio doors that Jamie kind of mentioned before. So we're not kind of over regulating that piece of it. And just trying to, make sure that people aren't building double wide boathouses, even though they're exempt structures. I was trying to review at the same time, either NR 115 and that's silent on the size, but there must be some guidance out there of why these numbers were in there, unless it's just historic numbers coming forward. And we can definitely revisit this, even as Jamie kind of mentioned, we're going to be looking at a lot of implementation policy issues and trying to clean things up internally as we move forward in this next year to look at this code. Because there is some question on that mitigation piece and dealing with impervious surfaces that I think there's room in here to make some changes and still be, still align us with state statute and state requirements. So we can definitely look at this further, what's in here.
If the committee's will is to remove sidewalls shall not exceed 10 feet, like we're not going to lose sleep because we just have to interpret one story then. And this is what's intended to be clarification. So that isn't
Yeah, I'm
it's fine.
I'm
Like-
not trying to hijack the public hearing about it either. It's I should have been at the last meeting, but I missed the last meeting to bring these points up. To me, it just seems arbitrary, that a random height of a wall. Same with the width of the building, because one thing to me with the width is it's not greater than 15 feet in width, but at the same time, we allow 450 square feet, which means you can build a 30-foot deep boathouse to get to the maximum square footage. That's literally like building a single wide trailer house, the footprint of it. So there again, I'm not sure why the 15-foot width number was in there to start with. Either there again, to me, it seems arbitrary number that was assigned at some point. And if we're truly trying to make it where we're not being as restrictive on property owners, I don't think we should be, as long as they're already meeting the other setback dimensions that might be required of it. I don't think we should be imposing these on it.
If I'm understanding properly, though, these guidelines here are in keeping with other guidelines set by other counties within the area. Is that correct?
That is correct. The 15-foot in width requirement specifically is added for the same reason as the sidewall height. So if in theory your objection is consistent, it would be on both of those items. And those would probably be, the other one was the minimum size of 200. So the minimum size of a boathouse, that was also added, but that was to reduce essentially these small sheds from just being set up there that are not really large enough to store a boat. Because some people were doing that and then people were complaining that those aren't boathouses. And so to try to be consistent about that. So those were really the three things. If you go back to why these changes, the current ordinance allows boathouses to potentially have a height of 35 feet. So the change would limit it to basically a 10-foot sidewall, which would be.
They could still build a 35-foot tall overall structure if they put a steep enough roof on it.
Right.
This only addresses the sidewalls, and that's the part that I have concern about. If we're trying to eliminate boat houses that theoretically could be 35 feet tall, we should be talking about the overall structure height, not the sidewall heights.
Right. So the way it's proposed, there's no specific total height.
It's still 35 foot, which would be a state law.
Right, which is excessive, and yeah, boathouses it would be viewed as visible. But the state law is still 1 story, so that's where the interpretation of 1 story comes in. So, I mean, those were clarifications that I think staff was looking for consistency purposes, and that was the rationale. But we can certainly not have those in there if that's the will of the board.
If within the next year we'll be revisiting this chapter for other stuff that we might be able to clean this up further, I would gladly hold off on discussing this further until then. If we want to revisit it then versus now in the public hearing. Chairman, do you have any?
Well, I guess my question is, are these the sort of questions that might be handled on a deviation basis at the local level?
That's us. We're the local level on these.
This is if they want a deviation from it, they have to pay the $800 variance fee and come before the Board of Adjustments and plead hardship.
That seems a little extreme.
So let's do this. So you guys it's not a secret. We had some staff turnover as it relates to administering this code. If the board is agreeable, and I can kind of see Brian Gallett's, let's pull out those 2 additions, which we were just adding. And we will put this section back on our list to further take a look at in terms of administration, because we're kind of keeping a list, most not related necessarily to the law, but just to kind of process and simplification, and potentially there's a couple sections that we have on our radar that are not proposed for changes within this revision. So we can add it to our list, and then we can revisit it in the next 12 months.
Okay.
Paul, does that sound okay?
Yes, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
All right.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if Brian is unmuted. I know he's tried to chime in before.
His hand raised.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I concur with the statements about consistency with other building requirements. It would seem to make sense. For example, local villages or townships, whatever, do have restrictions for auxiliary structures. So to me, if we have something that's more restrictive, that's not what we want to do, right? So do we need to create something that supports all those communities, or are we the authority that's now going to start setting what those should be or shouldn't be? I guess that thou shall not exceed to Supervisor Krebs 35 feet. You know, if I'm correct in my memory, within Richfield, an auxiliary structure was 25 feet max height, or at least it was at one point. I know they were going through revisions as well. So should there be consistency there? And we can't address that in this meeting. That's not going to happen. So, you know, I'm in favor if we can pass this tonight with the notion that there's going to be further review to have consistency with other ordinances that talk about height restrictions or width restrictions. So there's consistency. I'm in favor of that.
So are we going to be moving on this with these two items removed, or with the understanding that they're going in for now, but will be subject to review later? I'm unclear on exactly what stance we're going to take here.
Either is fine with staff. I mean, we still will administer this provision and in theory interpret one story to be reasonable, and continue to work with, whoever, you guys, to do that as these proposals come in. So
Could we for now approve this with the added items removed? And then if, within the next 12 months, we can address this area closer, more specifically for further discussion, or once we compare to, compared to other counties or whatever the comparable municipalities are that we're trying to look at for appropriate heights.
I mean, we can keep in mind this is boathouses only in the shoreline districts that we govern, but we can provide that analysis. So if you wanted to do that, I would suggest that when you make the motion to approve this, you add those changes.
This is Paul again, I guess, and I'll give an opinion, and I don't mind giving an opinion, but even as staff, I'd prefer to leave the numbers in there, and then look on trying to relax it than trying to do the opposite of taking everything out and then trying to put something back in later. Because somebody might look at that and say, oh, now's my perfect opportunity to do whatever. Also concerned because the DNR did review this draft and basically have given it the thumbs up. And if we take that out, I'm not necessarily finding, whether there's some act or some other code that's out there that, other staff in the office might know better, that says, no, these numbers have to be in there. Or there has to be some reference to size or width, or I know there's not necessarily out there anything for height that we know of. But I guess that would be what I'd prefer to move forward.
And so Paul, a question for you. Just confirming, earlier it said that this is in line with other counties. So how many counties was that?
From what Phil had said, and it was discussed more about the 10-foot wall height, is all the surrounding counties around us have that shall not exceed a 10-foot sidewall height.
So
Attorney Stern, you have a comment.
I know
Well, I understand Supervisor Krebs, there's concerns with, I think you said just, artificial or random or whatever the term was, but it's not. It's based on other counties. So I guess, are you concerned that our other counties are in the wrong as well, and that too many variances are going through, and why should a county limit the dimensional side heights or total height versus square footage? I guess I'm concerned where the concerns are, Supervisor Krebs.
I don't have a concern that other counties are doing it wrong, but just specifically what I've seen primarily on Big Cedar Lake. That's where I'm most familiar with boathouses, which is a kettly area. So there's steep slopes. I don't feel comfortable. We've never had a height restriction before of the sidewalls. So it's not, if we don't approve this, it's not like someone's going to sneak something in before we readdress it. Because there is no restriction right now. It's just, this is a part of a government that I'm just not comfortable with, because this is the government expanding the restrictions on something in a way that is arbitrary. There's no other than the other counties do it to 10, don't allow it to go past 10 foot. We have no other reasoning for not allowing a 11-foot wall or a 12-foot wall. So it's just too arbitrary from my perspective for a structure like this. Same with the width. And I know that's not changing. That's in black on the ordinance here. It hasn't been changed, but why are we even telling people how wide they can go with their boathouses? As long as they meet the side yard setbacks, I think we should allow them to design it to their use.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you. Having sat and sit on a board of zoning appeals, they routinely residents ask, homeowners ask, landowners ask, well, why can't I do this on my property? What's the rationale for it? And many times we have to resort back to, well, that's what the ordinance says. Well, who created the ordinance? Why did they create it? What's the intent of the ordinance? If Attorney Stern is on, he would attest to this. When you're on that board of zoning appeal, you have to understand what the intent of the ordinance was in the first place. Well, sometimes we don't have the answer to that. So I think what you're saying, not to belabor this discussion, but I think what you're saying is, why the 10-foot height restriction? Why don't we allow, if we are going to have some restrictions and it's square foot, do we care how high it is? And if we do, why are we limited to 10 foot? So we can at least be able to articulate to constituents why it is limited 10 foot. So I don't know if I've heard why it is limited 10 foot other than that surrounding counties are doing it. So why did they pick 10 foot? Is it for aesthetics? Is it for, I don't know what the answer to that is.
I mean, the overarching is limiting the sidewall height is the way to keep the height from being excessive and reduce the amount of boathouses that are visible from the lake or river. That said, you make good points. We talked about it at 1.2 of, do you pick 10? Do you pick 11? Do you pick 12? What is reasonable? And it is a question that it's a comfort level question that we vetted, and we hoped the committee would vet as well, as it relates to giving some input related to how this ordinance gets administered.
Right now, how it's worded, we have not limited the overall height of the boathouse structure. They can still build a 35-foot tall boathouse structure. Just because we're only limiting the single story of use to 10 feet. It's they on top of 10 foot, they can put 25 feet of roof structure still. So if it's for aesthetics, for protecting the views from either the lakeside or from the neighbors, the overall height of the boathouse, I think, should be addressed versus the height of a single story. So I think this takes more debate, more looking into and stuff. Like Supervisor Gallant said, I have no reason right now to explain to anyone else why we approved it at 10 foot. So without that, at that point, I'm just not comfortable putting it in there to start with. If there's no good reason other than Dodge County does it or Fond du Lac does it.
I guess at this point in time, I would like to defer to Jamie or Paul with your recommendation, then let's proceed. Do we remove it or do we keep it at 10 feet? Or
I mean, if the sentiment, and I'm kind of talking to Supervisor Gallantz because he was the other person who seemed to have a stronger opinion on this. If the sentiment is we want to be as least restrictive as possible, and we want to make sure that we are, we don't, the rationale about what other people are doing and the whole, the difference between 10 feet and 11 feet isn't something that is a concern, and we want to have the opportunity to take a look at that further under Paul Sebo's leadership, then I would suggest you make that in your motion as a comment. We go back, we note to the DNR that that was done during the public hearing to make sure that it's acceptable as we advance the ordinance. So I would like to see the ordinance move forward. This is not something that we see as a major, hurdle or causes undue hardship at the staff level. I mean, we were just trying to put forward a consistent ordinance that, mirrors best practices and gives some guidance to staff in administering this. So, and we can do that without this, and we can do that in the future. So if that's how you feel and that is the sentiment, then I think what you're saying makes sense.
Would you like me to put together a motion
yes,
to word it?
because I'm not real clear exactly how the wording should be.
I would make a motion to remove on line 15 of page 21, strike out sidewall height shall not exceed 10 feet. And then on line 16, I would strike out not greater than 15 feet in width. And then lastly, on line 21, and we'll go on to line 22, I would strike out the first two sentences that for boathouses with a flat roof, decks are allowed to be constructed on the flat roof. No sidewalls or screens are allowed on the roof. And I think by removing those sections with the understanding, we can come back in the next couple of months and do our research and discuss it further. We can then put stuff back in that us as a committee would be comfortable with.
Do you have that recorded, Mary?
According to my notes, from the August meeting, the boathouse items were a policy question, not a DNR issue.
Yeah, so you can see we struck out no decks are allowed on the roofs of boathouses. So decks are allowed on boathouses under state law, which trumps the county's ordinance. So this was an area we were trying to make more consistent with state law.
Yep.
And so the addition of, which it's okay if we don't include the addition that decks are allowed, they're still allowed.
I'm fine with the decks allowed. It's the part of the no sidewalls or screens are allowed on the roof, because because we're talking sidewall height, sidewalls, and then we're talking roof sidewalls, roof structures.
Yes, and this is a slightly different animal. Paul, do you have a comment on the screens? Because I know you're dealing with this issue right now. Are you following?
Yeah, I'm following. Yeah, I don't have a comment on that. I'm not sure what the purpose of the no sidewalls or screens, other than it's more than just an open deck. So yeah, it doesn't bother me.
Well, I would second the motion if it's understood by all that it'd be striking those items, and that we would revisit at a later date to determine should there be restrictions added back in.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'd like to entertain a vote to accept the motion and the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No opposed. All right, the motion is accepted.
And that's okay, we will remove those items, but I just want to comment and we'll go back and check. The no sidewalls or screens allowed on the roof, I'm not sure we can allow that. Following. On a boathouse. So,
But we're not sure if we can ban them either then. If you're not sure if allowing them or not sure about.
no, I'm fairly certain that is the consistent language with the state law on this item. Because walls, so if you have a deck and then you put walls on the roof, you're getting into that second story type definition. And that's what they don't want, is like gazebo type structures or screens.
Well, we'll be able to look at further when we revisit this.
Yes,
correct?
and by removing it, if the state law says it's not allowed, it's just still not allowed.
Sure.
It's just not called out in our ordinance.
Yep. Okay.
All right, we have the motion has been, the amendment has been voted on and seconded and voted and approved. And now it's time to move the ordinance on to, I guess we need a motion to approve the draft ordinance as amended and forward it to the full county board for consideration. Is there a motion to that effect?
So we already have that motion.
All right. We had a motion and a second on that. Is there a vote aye to say, yes, we do this? In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, very good. Thank you. Now, we'll continue on with the conditional use permit request submitted by Brian and Sarah Raymond. Mary, would you read that, please?
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held at a meeting of the Washington County Land Use and Planning Committee in room 1019 of the Washington County Government Center on Thursday, October 22nd, 2020 at 6:15 p.m. There will be heard and considered the petition of Brian and Sarah Raymond for a conditional use permit for associated filling, grading, and excavating of greater than 15,000 feet within 300 feet of the ordinary high water mark of a stream, new driveway in a shoreland, wetland, and floodplain zoning district. Tax key T1203580Y on Fairview Drive, Allenton, Wisconsin, dated this 5th day of October, 2020.
I hereby declare this public hearing open. Are there anyone here with comments, participating live or accessing the meeting regarding this proposal? Any comments from any supervisors? Hearing no response to the offer to speak, I'll entertain a motion and recommend approving granting the conditional use permit as presented with the caveats presented as part of the formal recommendation. Is there a second? Thank you. Hearing no comments, I will entertain a motion, or do we not need a motion for this?
Need to close the public hearing.
All right. So we close the public hearing then. All right. Forgive me for not knowing all the protocols. At this point in time, we'll entertain a motion to grant the conditional use permit as presented. Is there a second? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. That is, the conditional use permit is granted as it was presented. Now, let's move back on the agenda and pick up on the consent agenda. I commend all of you who have taken time to develop the reports for this committee.
Excuse me, Chairman.
Sorry?
Sorry, I had a technical difficulty there. When you said as presented, I'm assuming you're referring to staff's recommendation that no fill occur in the area. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes. Yes.
I guess I'm not understanding exactly what you're asking, Brian.
On the conditional use, the report, there was a recommendation by staff to approve so long as there's no fill Was that what you said in the motion as presented?
Yes, yes, it was
Okay.
approved as presented.
Thank you.
Sir, yeah, yes. I made the motion that we approve the conditional use permit. Supervisor Krebs seconded it. All right, very good. Anyway, on to the consent agenda. Although we may not discuss these items at length here as a committee, I want to make sure everybody who has prepared these reports and submitted the information that we do indeed read them and digest them. And we thank them for taking the time to prepare the reports and updates. At this point in time, I'll entertain a motion to accept the items on the consent agenda as presented. Is there a motion? Supervisor Boltman, second. Supervisor Krebs, any discussion on any of these reports? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of accepting the consent agenda items as presented, say aye.
Aye.
The consent agenda items are accepted as presented. Now let's move on to the action items. C and D, USDA wildlife damage and abatement crop prices and the program budget. Comments from Mr. Sebo on either or both of these?
Yes, we do have a representative in the office or in the meeting that is going to be speaking to both of these items.
How's everybody doing tonight? Good? Okay, so I have the crop prices for 2020. I don't know how much detail usually Mike gives, so bear with me. But the crop prices are a year-long compilation, and these are the average prices. And typically, most counties approve what we provide, but you have the option to change those prices as well. So that's before you. And I need signatures on these two tonight, if I could, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Larry Strupp, our Farm Services Agency rep that sits on this committee, he called me earlier. He did send an email to Linda Doro saying he wouldn't be able to make tonight's meeting, but he did call and just wanted to point out that current bean prices for soybeans is at $10 per bushel, and corn prices at $3.70 per bushel. So it is a little bit higher than the crop prices that are being proposed. And I guess sir, if you could introduce yourself. I know Mike Berg talked about coming, but there was going to be somebody else representative that he thought. So not being there, I didn't get a chance to introduce myself or introduce you.
Yeah, I didn't hear everything he said. The crop prices are higher now than what they were. So if you choose to increase the price that's proposed, that's the county's choice.
So can you explain how these crop prices are determined again?
Yeah, so it's a year long. So we take the average monthly throughout the month, throughout the year, starting January all the way through, or basically it's a fiscal year. So for the whole year, we've compiled crop prices, and this is the average price for the entire year. A lot of farmers will set their prices back last year before planting even starts, so they already have their crops sold at a certain price point. And so those prices might be lower than what this is. They might be higher than what this is, but this price that we have here is what the average is throughout the state for the entire year. So prices were down low last year, and now they've raised here now just recently. So that's why the prices you're seeing now for corn and soybeans is quite a bit higher than what we have on the proposed price. And they fluctuate throughout the year. That's why we have an average.
Yeah, I don't think you want to go with any kind of a spot market price because it is going to change every day according to the rain in downtown Chicago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Any questions or comments or other discussion?
Chairman Mary, I do have a question.
Yes,
So
sir.
if I'm looking at, I'm sorry, which action item? Are we on C and D or just C?
Right now, we're discussing item C.
Okay. I defer then to D.
You want to continue with discussion on D, or do we need to have a motion and close this one out first?
Close this one out first.
All right.
Good. I have one other question, Chairman.
Yes, sir. Mr. Krebs.
Looking at the committee report, I don't know much about crop damage, but it talks about this is crop damage due to bear, cougar, deer, elk, geese, turkeys, sandhill cranes. So this is wildlife crop damage, not other forms of damage.
That's correct. Yeah, other crop damage that might be caused by, the damage program that we're talking about, there are 5 species that are eligible for compensation: bear, deer, turkey, geese, and elk. Cougar and sandhill cranes, they're not eligible at this time, or cougar are, but they're for livestock. Sandhill cranes aren't eligible this time because there's not an established hunting season in the state. But we still look at damages on occasion. But the eligibility for the program primarily are deer, bear, turkey, and geese, and then elk, which we don't have elk and bear in this part of the state most of the time. So, so damage from raccoons or Mother Nature or acts of God, those are all covered under crop insurance and not part of this program.
Okay, who makes the determination of what caused the damage?
We do. Mike, who normally would be at this meeting, he actually goes out and appraises the crops and determines the cause of damage.
Okay.
So he'll go out and look whether it's deer or turkey or goose damage, primarily in this county.
Okay, thank you.
What we're doing tonight is by looking at the 2020 crop price proposal, we're basically setting the rate at which the farmers would be reimbursed.
Yes, sir, that is
That
correct.
is correct.
And then we go out and we establish the loss that was caused by those species. And so then the loss plus the dollar amount equals the compensation.
Does everybody understand that? Any other questions or comments? What we're really doing is going to vote to accept the price proposal as presented with item C, wildlife damage and abatement crop prices. Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. I'd like to vote on this. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, thank you. That motion passed. Now let's go on to the abatement program budget, which follows immediately after. Entertain a motion to accept the budget as prepared for 2021. Is there a motion to accept?
I'll make a motion to accept the 2021 budget as presented.
Is there a second? All right,
Second.
Supervisor Boltman seconds. Discussion and qualification, sir.
Yes, Chair Mary, my question was looking at section, this was the backup material for everybody's reference. I was a little confused. I talked to the financial plan, 28,379.50. And there's a second page too that has the same total dollar amount, but the line items are different. So I'm just looking for any clarification on that.
Can you address that?
No, I'm sorry, I can't address it, but can somebody repeat the question? I'm sorry, I had trouble hearing them.
I believe what he's asking is that the 2021 totals at the bottom of the charts, in the first 2 columns, it totals 25,098.78, but then it's saying the full cost is 28,000. Is that correct?
That's correct. This
Right.
cost is 28,000.
Well, right, I understand that. It's the difference between page 1 and 2. They're both equal total dollar amounts, total funding approved, but different line items. And some of them seem to be, I don't want to say So there's mileage and travel, overhead, venison. So is this covering different resources?
Okay, so the difference is if you look at page number 1 where the salaries includes 14,945.52, and the second page is 15,945.52. The county administration, we break out the county administration in that, which is the county, they request a salary for their administration of the program. So that's the county breakout of that. Does that make sense?
It does, but wouldn't the total then be different, or are we saying we're redoing? So which one is the final, I guess, document?
There's 2 plans. One's for oh gosh. It's a breakdown of the actual the cost elements, and the line items are just different. And the DNR needs it specifically for their purposes, and the county needs it specifically for their purposes. Primarily the reason why we break it down separately for both. So that's why you're seeing different things, but the total cost is ultimately the same.
So
The total cost is the same, but the line items are different. So venison processing, mileage, overhead, some of those differences there. It just seems odd to me that there would be, I guess, 2 separate budgets, one for the state, one for the county.
Right, we realize that, and this has been established a long time ago why they needed it two different ways. Because counties have their own way they want to see things broken down, and the state has their way they want to see things broken down. So that's why you're seeing it broken down in 2 different ways.
So it's different reporting formats.
Yes.
Okay.
I just don't recall seeing it quite like that the previous go around, and maybe I did. I just don't remember. Well, that so long as the totals are the same and everybody's okay that they're different, one for the state, one for the county, then who am I to question?
Yeah, Supervisor Gallus, we have been getting these forms like this as long as I can remember that I've been in my position bringing these to the committee. They've always shown the 2 different style budgets, and yeah, some of the big differences is that county administration. That's what we get as a county to administer the program. Basically, it's that check passing, budget passing piece for administrative work. But on the top, it's kind of included in the salaries and how they report it to the DNR. And on our end, it's broken out so we can actually put it as a revenue account.
Got it. So maybe I think what I understood is DNR says, here are the buckets, if you will, segregated buckets. How you guys choose to use it in the county is up to you.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. I would entertain a vote. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Thank you.
I do need signatures. Who would do that for me?
I guess I will probably do that this evening, or else Jamie would. So I'll take care of that when we're done with the meeting here. That wraps up the business we have on the agenda tonight. The next thing we need to discuss is what we started chatting about before the meeting got underway. What do you want to do for the November and December meetings? Do you want to do November the Tuesday before? As was pointed out, we very likely will have some items to discuss. It will need discussion in the November time. We can do the Tuesday before, and I don't have a calendar. I believe someone said that would be the 24th.
Yep.
Or we can do the week before, which would be, again, returning to a morning meeting on Thursday, the 21st.
19th.
Then I'm sorry, 19th. All right, I'm sorry. Supervisor Gallus, do you have a preference? I think we've lost Supervisor Gallantz. Of those who are here tonight, any particular preference, Tuesday or Thursday?
Supervisor Mary, the November 19th works for me. And if you're saying December would shift to the same Thursday before the 17th, is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, both those November, December dates work for me.
So for the November meeting and the December meeting, we'll move the calendar up 1 week prior to the schedule. So it'll be the third Thursday and not the fourth Thursday of November and in December. So yes, so this will be a morning meeting, 7:30 a.m. Back to the morning schedule. You have that recorded, Mary? All right. There being no other business to discuss tonight, I declare us adjourned.
Thank you for setting those dates. That's helpful. You know, to have them, I mean,
Well, yeah,